It is Friday, the 8th of July 2022. In this Skidmark, I want to talk a bit about NATO, because NATO is on the front page all the time. And there is a lot of things around this NATO expansions that has been the root of many of the irritations between Russia and the West. But I think we should look at the whole situation logically and objectively. Now, the first thing that I'm going to show is a map, and the title of the map is The Enlargement of NATO 1949 until 2018. Now, if you look at that map, the dark blue was in 1949, and it was Iceland and Norway, the United Kingdom, France, the Netherlands, and Italy, and Portugal. And that was the original NATO. And since then, NATO has expanded. And if you look carefully at the map, first at the countries that came in 1952, that was Turkey, and then 55 till 1990 is Spain, Germany, and that's it, Spain and Germany. And then in 1999, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary. In 2004, Slovakia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Now, if you look at the process, how it happened, then it gives validity to Putin's claim that the EU-NATO combination is a Western replication of the old USSR. And I say this because there's a lot of people that makes claim that Putin wants to recreate the old USSR. But if you look at this map and look at what's going on there, then you have to agree it's actually the West that has got this expansion going. Now look at it from the view of Russia. This military alliance is all the time creeping closer to the Russian borders. And nobody can accuse the Russians of being hypersensitive, because we know that the US is a warmongering thing. They are forever involved in wars around the globe. Since Second World War, there hasn't been a single year that the US hasn't been involved in a war somewhere. Of course, it must make Russia nervous. Now, we need to take into consideration what Lavrov had said. If you listen to what Western politicians say, then it will be clear that Russia was declared enemy simply because it doesn't want to agree to new liberal world order that US, which subjugated the Western world, imposes on others under the slogan of rules-based order. That is very important. And now I'm going to play a clip of Scott Ritter, and it is a speech that he made at the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. It's a short clip, but it's important that you listen to what he is saying about NATO and about the possibilities and probabilities of a land war in Europe.
We do not have a military today that can fight a large-scale ground war in Europe. I'll say it one more time because this is important. We do not have a military today that can fight a large-scale ground war in Europe. And yet, what is the president positioning us to do? Fight a large-scale ground war in Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, if we fight the Russians, we will lose. We will lose hands down. It won't even be close. NATO doesn't exist anymore. Oh, it's there as an organization. When I was in, the British had the British Army on the Rhine. 80,000 guys, highly trained. Today, they barely have 80,000 guys in their entire military. Ask the Brits to put together a brigade and send it out their island into Europe. They can't do it. They can't do it. Ask the French. They can't do it. Ask the Germans. They can't do it. No one can do it. So NATO is a problem. The military that exists today, is a byproduct of 20 years of neglect. We do not have a military today that can fight a large-scale ground war in Europe.
The next map that I'm putting up is the expansions in Europe since the end of the Soviet Union. And if you look at this map, you can clearly see that the West used NATO to suck these independent countries in that used to be part of the Soviet Union. What is the reason for that? NATO was supposed to be a defensive organization, but look at what they are doing. And then you must take in consideration that in every one of those countries, NATO put down a base and they put down a lot of military equipment and armaments and so forth. So obviously, Russia has very solid suspicions of what are the intentions of NATO. Because out of these activities, it's clearly that NATO is actually threatening Russia. And then we should listen to this. This is a post that I found today, and it's talking about Serbia. We shall stay neutral and keep out of any of the alliances. Why not keeping good relationships to the EU, China and Russia with minor compromises? Serbia is in a good position to master its own fate in between these big powers without forgetting the historical bond with Russia. And one has to think about this because these countries have seen what happened in the Ukraine. And on top of all of these things that I have discussed now, you must now take into consideration what is actually happening to the Western military. These are NATO supporters. They are the people that are supposed to be the actual active soldiers of NATO. Canada has introduced changes in the nation's military dress code, allowing service members to have long nails, face tattoos, and to dye their hair. Their new rules also permit men to wear skirts. According to an FAQ released by the Canadian military on Tuesday, the dress code revision was long overdue, but the changes were not made lightly. The appearance of the Canadian Armed Forces, CAF, has not kept pace with the Canadian society which it serves, the document reads. The CAF says the purpose of the reform, which will come into effect in September 2022, is to make rules more inclusive and gender neutral. One of the major changes is that the uniforms will be no longer divided into the categories male and female. This means that service members who identify as men will be able to wear skirts, given that all references to gender have been removed in respect to items such as skirts, nylons and purses. Both catalogues are open to all members and they may be intermixed. CAF members may choose whichever design best fits, as long as it is worn as per the dress instructions, the military said, with exceptions for special occasions such as parades. What absolute stupidity is this? An army consists out of soldiers. Soldiers are your warriors. They must protect the country and they must fight the enemy. And soldiers must be able to kill. What is this now? But this woke wave has also infested the US military. Look at this image that appeared on Twitter. That is absolutely shocking to look at that. And now you must imagine these are the people that are supposed to attack Russia, to fight against the Russian forces. What are the chances? And then there's also, through to the internet, there are some, out of all this talk about the woke army, there is now things that are coming out that is hilarious. Look at this one. Introducing the 7th branch of the military, Transforce. I don't know what to say. To me, this is crazy. And then there's this one, US Special Forces. I cannot understand how these things are even discussed. And then there's this one. Now this meme, I think it must hurt some people. Recruitment is down and we have no idea why. I must say that talking about NATO is actually depressing, because NATO had a purpose after World War II. But over the years, that purpose has been watered down, and NATO has changed from being a defensive organization to an offensive organization. And they were involved in a lot of wars, as Scott Ritter explained in that video clip. I don't know what is going to be the end of this story, but we all know that a land war with Russia will be a disaster, especially for NATO.